Hey, just a quick note. This is another one of our special video podcast episodes. You are currently listening to the audio version of this podcast, but we recommend watching the video version as well for some visual context. To find the video version, go to our YouTube page at youtube.com/popcord or get the link directly from this episode's description. Otherwise, keep this playing and let's get started. Welcome back to Popcord. Jumping right in, we are talking to Noorul N, a 21-year-old from Dubai. Noor became viral on TikTok after sharing her personal traumatic story of an ordinary wedding/shadi visit to Pakistan gone wrong. Essentially, Noor and her family flew to Pakistan from Dubai to attend her cousin's wedding, and unexpectedly, she found that she was getting engaged against her consent at the age of 12 by her parents. Her TikTok video covering this story has over 1.5 million views as of this recording, and now Noor is here to share her full story in detail with us on the podcast, as well as her thoughts and her learnings from this incident. You can watch the full TikTok by following the links in our episode's description or her username on TikTok. This is currently a two-part story on her TikTok account, with each part being 1 minute long. Feel free to watch those videos first before continuing this one. Without further ado, we'll go ahead and jump in with Noor.
Okay, so my name is Noor and I live in Dubai. I was born and brought up in Dubai and I'm from Pakistan. I recently just graduated from Murdoch University, Dubai. So kind of trying to figure out life over here. And yeah, pretty much it. I don't know if I said this, but I'm 21 years old.
Okay, and were you born in Pakistan or were you born here in Dubai?
No, I was born and brought up in Dubai.
But I'm guessing you visit Pakistan pretty often.
Yeah, as a child, of course, like I used to go there like every summer. I spent like 3 months over there.
So you were, the TikTok goes, if I remember correctly, you were 12 years old. You were going to Pakistan for your cousin's wedding, right? And
Yes.
then something strange started happening there. You started noticing people acting weird.
Yeah.
Am I describing it pretty correctly?
Pretty correctly, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can kind of share what happened from your perspective, from what you remember. Of course, you were only, you were 12. So, but what do you remember?
So that was the first time that I flew alone to Pakistan because there was some problem going on with the airline. And I remember my mom and siblings, they left and I was stuck at the airport and I had to go back home and fly the next day. So when I arrived, everyone was like pretty, excited, like, oh my God, your uncles and aunties are so excited to meet you. So it was like that strange behavior kind of started like at the airport itself. And then I went for the wedding and a lot of the elders were just treating me really funny. They started like trying to feed me sweets, and there is this like, I think, ritual where they try to feed you sweets so that you get married off early. And I mean, it's kind of understandable to do that for elders. Like, I was 12. So if they would do that to someone who's like 23, 24, it makes sense. But they started coming to me and they started giving me sweets and pretty weird. But yeah, I just kind of like ignored it.
What's funny is, as a guy, it's kind of sad too. As a guy, like, you get these things as well. When I was a kid, people would be like, oh, tumhari shadi bhi karni hai jaldi se. And, they try to make you shy, I guess, a little bit. So they're like, koi ladki dekhi hai, koi ladki phasai hai tumne? And I'm like, I'm 14. Yeah, but you never take it that seriously as a guy, because we are not as much, I think, threatened by those things, because typically we're not as forced into these types of situations. But in your case, and it's sad, I think, for a lot of girls in our culture, it's always like, hey, are they joking or are they kind of half serious right now? Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah, your story will kind of confirm that. And by the way, so you went to your cousin's wedding. Are you a fan of weddings? Do you enjoy weddings? Do you like dance at weddings and all that stuff?
I'm too shy to dance, but I love dressing up for weddings. I mean, it's pretty chaotic to go to a Pakistani wedding, especially if it's like your cousins, because you end up being so like responsible of so many other things that are happening around the house. So it's always chaotic. You will never find your things. No matter how early you try to get ready, you'll always be late. So that's like a very, like, being fashionably late is like a desi thing always. But yeah, also coming back to the point that you said about guys being pressurized, like, but not really. My brother, who is going to be 16, he's the one who tends to hear these things that, oh, तुम्हारी कब शादी करेंगे, you know, लड़की है तुम्हारे पास कि नहीं, girlfriend तो रखी होगी तुमने. And he's like, you know, I have my life ahead. I'm in school right now. क्यों आप लोग मुझे ऐसे पूछ रहे हैं? So he's like, you know, it's kind of funny sometimes, but then at the same time, it's like, it's not good to put it in his head.
Yeah, you're right. It's a weird double standard. Like a lot of people think that the kid maybe likes it. I used to get really uncomfortable in those types of situations. लेकिन हमारे कल्चर में लड़कों को आगे बढ़ाया जाता है. It'll be like, यार लड़की नहीं फंसाई यार, तुम्हारे पास गर्लफ्रेंड ही नहीं है. And then on the other hand, if a girl has that kind of thing, it's like scandalous, you know. So लड़कियों की तो बात ही ना करो.
I swear.
Does that happen in your family? Because it definitely happens in mine. I hate that.
A lot. You have no clue.
Like I remember when I was growing up, that's what I kind of started feeling, because I would never hear, like, you know, my cousins talk about any guys in the house, like, at all. Or like, I didn't even know until like I grew up that they had like guy friends. And while everyone was sitting together, they would ask the guys like, oh, you know, when do you want to get married? And it was such an easy conversation for them. And I feel like guys tend to get away with it because they know that, you know, they have to work ahead, so they have to build their careers. They then, until and unless they cannot afford to have a family, they're set, you know? True. But like girls, they tend to not have that because, I mean, I think it's optional for like parents if they want to, you know, continue the education, or they should be working and then they should marry. I think that's like the choice of the parents usually. It's
slowly changing. I think in a lot of families, it's slowly kind of changing that double standard. But it's still not there yet.
100%.
It's still not there yet. So anyway, back to your wedding story. So auntie started giving you sweets and stuff and said, "Tumhari jaldi shaadi ho jaye, inshallah, vagara vagara." Then what happened from there?
Yeah, so I think the weirdest thing that happened was, I think it was one of my cousins' walima. So we had like multiple weddings happening. But then the walima, the first walima that was happening there, my mom starts acting like really sketchy. And she's like, we have to leave soon. And I asked her like, why, you know, the wedding is still going on and we have other weddings to attend as well. And I don't know, I didn't understand what she was saying, that, you know, your uncle is really excited to see you. Your cousins are so excited to see you. So we have to go soon. And as a child, you know, you are here for the wedding and you just want to have fun with your cousins. So yeah, and I just became so suspicious of, you know, my mom's behavior that I just started asking my cousins, please check, why are we leaving so, you know, soon? We've never left a wedding like this. So, and then one of my cousins, she just, you know, overheard my mom talking to one of the elders that, oh, we're getting, you know, my daughter engaged. And, you know, she came back to me and she told me that. And it was obviously like a shock to me because as a 12-year-old, I don't know how you're supposed to receive that information about you. Like, you know, you're a child. I thought that like maybe it might be a joke, but then with the way that the situation was kind of like progressing like forward, I knew that it was serious. I didn't take it well. I went back home. I looked for my mom and I just started, you know, shouting at the top of my lungs that, you know, how could you do this to me? She had no, it's like, you know, they don't know how to explain themselves. And all they can say is that we were going to have this conversation with you, but they didn't. You know, it was too late and I found it in the worst way possible. And even if they were going to have that conversation with me, my thinking at that age, I feel like I was more mature. So I understood that this was still not the right conversation to have, no matter what time you would have chosen.
So you were 12 and even then you kind of knew about it. Like this is not, whatever's happening is not good, right? Because that's unfortunate. I think a lot of other 12-year-olds, I mean, hote to bacha hi hai na, a lot of them might not even know what's happening and they might think like, you know, whatever my mom is doing is probably for the best. But you kind of had that, you know, कि यार ये जो हो रहा है सही नहीं हो रहा. Of course.
Because the thing is like, when you kind of like put yourself in that position, you start thinking that, okay, I'm a 12-year-old getting engaged. What about the people around me who are 12-year-olds? You know, how would they react? And as a child, you're really conscious of those things. That what are other friends of mine going to say? Are they going to be accepting of this? Or do they deserve to know this? You know, I kept thinking about those things as well, because as a child, you don't understand what it means to be engaged. I kind of did, but at the same time, it's like, you don't understand that type of commitment or love or any of that at that age. Even if some people do, they don't really understand it strongly, to how it really should be. And I didn't at that time. So when I did go, we had to leave after like a day. Like the family ended up convincing them and all, because at that point when I started shouting, everyone found out that, now I'm aware of this, and everyone tried to comfort me, which was so crazy because it's like, now that I look back, that is so messed up because everyone's supposed to be against it, like a 12-year-old getting engaged to like her cousin. And at that point, I didn't know that it was my cousin. So.
Oh, so you didn't even know who the guy was?
No. The thought of just the engagement itself was like scary, obviously. But then I get to know that
was this a cousin from your guy's side? From your dad's side or from your mom's side?
From my dad's side.
Dad's side, okay. And then where was your dad in this picture?
My dad was not in town at that time because he was going to come around like 29th or something. I clearly remember the dates, which is crazy as well, because we left early. And he just had some work, and he's like, I'll come on time. So, yeah. And the engagement actually happened on 29th. So he came like a day or two before that. Yeah.
Okay.
So he kind of like missed all of that drama that happened. And my mom was the one who had to handle it, and the elders around me. But no one talked to me about what it meant to be engaged, what it meant to move forward from that point onwards. All people were trying to do was not like, they just wanted me to calm down. That's all.
Yeah. Wow.
And even after all of that happened, nobody said anything about it. But that is so crazy to me that as a child, you learn these things from your adults, and I had no clue what to do.
Yeah. And we're not talking about like the 70s or 80s or the 60s when these types of things were pretty common. Like, for example, my mom, when she got arranged, my mom and dad, and my mom was about 16 when she got engaged, and then 19 when she actually got married. So wo kehti hain ke, when she got engaged, she was just hearing about it, kind of like you, right? But this is back in the 70s, mid to late 70s when they got married. So she was like, I just saw him from a distance, and that's about it. And then I just heard that I'm getting engaged, and my mom told me you're getting engaged, and that was it. And then they've been married for 45 years now. These types of stories are like crazy to hear now. But I understand that was a different time, alag waqt tha, and a lot of these marriages turned out pretty successful. So good for them. But aajkal ke zamane mein, this was what, 2012? What year was this?
It was 2011. Yeah.
Yeah. So when did you find out that it was your cousin that you were getting engaged to?
It was like all overnight. So when I got to know that I'm getting engaged, and I was just throwing a fit with my mom, and then, people started gathering, obviously, because it's like a wedding house. So they had two different houses, and they were like, it's like they were joined together. So the wedding guests were in the other house on the right side, and us family were on the left side because, everyone wanted to change and then go and cater to the guests. So the guests didn't get to see all that, but the family did. So whatever they heard, it was pretty quiet over there. So everyone heard that, what was happening. So they just tried to comfort me. And then when they did tell me that, it was my cousin, my mom didn't tell me that. It was my aunt who told me. And at that time, I was so weirded out because I call him Bhai, and how am I supposed to move forward from that? And even until I think like even the day when I met them and everything, I was still calling him Bhai. So it was so embarrassing, but at the same time, it was like, how am I supposed to kind of switch from calling someone my brother?
How old was he, by the way?
He's about 8 to 9 years elder than me. So if I'm not mistaken, he was 20 at that time.
He was 20, you were 12, right?
Yeah.
So obviously you called him Bhai. Yeah.
Yeah.
So my older brother also is married to his cousin, and she's not, I think she's like 7 years younger than him. So kind of similar. Again, it worked out really well for them. They liked each other. Okay. So it was all consensual. So, rishta bheja, she said yes, and everything's good. लेकिन बचपन की कहानियां बताते हैं ना, तो बचपन में वो उनको गोद में उठा के लेके जाते थे बाहर कैंडीज लेने के लिए, टॉफियां लेने के लिए, And I
Oh
found that,
yeah.
and they joke, yeah, they joke about that so openly, and I'm like, yeah, थोड़ा सा अजीब लगता है. I mean, again, I'm glad it worked out for you guys, but I could never imagine doing that with a
Yeah.
cousin. So it's not for everybody.
100%, because even when like, you know, after everything that was happening, people start, it's like they were joking about these things. And
Uh-huh. Yeah.
like, are you guys saying that it's okay for you to get married to someone that you call your brother for, like, you know, almost your entire life, and all of a sudden you're like husband, you know, fiance or whatever
Yeah.
that is?
Yeah.
Like, that's so weird, and they normalize it so much in our society.
About the joking thing,
Yeah.
right? One time, shortly after they got married, like a few weeks later, maybe, वो आपस में हंसी मजाक कर रहे थे, and she accidentally called him भाई. और सारों ने फिर हंसना शुरू कर दिया, निकाह टूट गया, निकाह टूट. And again, I was like, this is just uncomfortable. but yeah,
I swear.
people joke about it as if like they kind of know कि यार थोड़ा अजीब सा है, but it is what it is.
I think like we find it weird to, like, I think elders don't. I strongly believe that, because they start, you know, patching kids up like together since like they're young.
Yeah.
So they say that, you know, when they grow up, then, you know, we'll try to see if, you know, things work out, and then we'll try to, you know, fix them up together. And that is what, so the guy that I, like, who was getting married over there, he's the one who said that to me, that, you know, when I was young, and because he got married to his cousin as well, and he was like, you know, we were told that, you know, you guys might get married or later on in like life and all that, and they did, because बड़ों ने बात की थी. And
Yeah.
he was saying it to me in such a way that he was just trying to comfort me, and I could not find comfort in that, because I was telling him that you are way older than me, and if I am a child now, then I should not be knowing about these things, you know.
And that's what I was going to ask. You know, he was 20. I mean, yeah, I would say maybe he's one generation up from yours, but he was still not that. You know, he's not like an uncle at that point in time. So didn't he find it kind of odd that number one, you know, my cousin is way too young. She's 12, and number two, she's against this. So, you know, kuch dal mein kuch kala hai, maybe I should step up and speak up about it. Do you think that crossed his mind?
Okay, so from what I'm aware, like, to how the story went from his end, is that he tried to tell his father that, no, this is not okay, because obviously, like, you know, we're pretty young, and he wanted maybe to get, you know, engaged to someone else, but his father said no. So, because he's my uncle, he's my daya, so that's my dad's elder brother, and they just had that talk together, and they felt that, you know, they can't break it off or say no at this point. And the guy, I think that he should have stood up and said no still, but then there's this thing where kids just, you know, whatever their parents say, they end up doing it, because they think that, you know, house mein behtari hoti hai, that whatever parents say is good for them. But I feel like that was wrong, because people should realize that I was 12. And the craziest thing is that nobody asked if I was okay with it. So whatever decision was made was against my choice. So it was without my consent. Even if things were moving forward, no one was asking me what I wanted. It was what he wanted.
You know, and even if he didn't want it,
People wanted him to say just yes. बात पक्की हो गई है, elders have agreed. Okay, fine, move forward.
हमारे elders में ये भी मैंने देखा है. I'm not saying this is in your family, but I've noticed this in my family and a few others. हमारे elders में भी ये भी होता है कि, I mean, your dad's older brother basically runs a show for the whole family. So अगर आपके, even if your dad is kind of against something, if your taya says something, वो फिर, you know, that's the law. तो वो ताया ने जो डिसाइड कर लिया वो पूरी फैमिली को रन करेगा. Everybody's, you know, chacha वगैरह, everybody's system. So that's you know, that's another kind of elder hierarchy thing. Me and my siblings, we often argue with my mom and dad about this stuff. Like, you know, why are like वो डेरे क्या कहते हैं, you know, बड़े क्या कहते हैं. Like, you know, this is like ancient type of thinking. We need to get out of this kind of system and say everybody's an individual. And everybody has rights and preferences that should be respected. ये नहीं होना चाहिए कि यार बड़ों ने ये कह दिया तो बस वो जो बड़े कहते हैं वही हम करेंगे. ये बड़ी, you know, पुरानी किस्म की thinking है. पहले चलती थी, अब नहीं चलती आजकल.
But then our parents still do that, because I feel like they have grown up with that. So those type of habits are hard to break. So like now we live in this world where, you know, we're told that we have to make our decisions on our own, and those things happen and all that. But our elders were always, you know, told that कोई चीज इस तरह नहीं करनी जो हमारे लिए ठीक ना हो.
And they just kind of followed that. And I feel like
they'll do it for the rest of their lives.
So anyway, we can continue with the story. Did you actually end up getting engaged, or what happened after that?
So yeah, we traveled to my dad's town, and you know, the whole, you know, preparation and everything started happening, and I didn't even understand, you know, what to do. And they got the dress, they did everything. And then the day comes, and like my dad even didn't have like this conversation with me at all about it. And all the conversation was about that, you know, if everything is in place, all that, the engagement moved forward, and it was in a proper, you know, it was a proper ceremony. So many people came over there, I think like hundreds. I don't even know the number of people that came. Like, it was a proper function because it was such a blurry day for me. We had like proper photographers over there. So it was wild.
And I remember that
I had lost my appetite, and, you know, he and I were also not talking to each other because obviously, like, I felt like at that time we both didn't want it, but then none of us could say anything because, you know, it's the elders. What will they say? And now the function is happening. And I remember everyone kept trying to tell us to smile
for like the cameras and everything. And we're just looking at each other, and it's so awkward. And like, okay, you could see that it was so forced, but.
In your case, it seems like choti moti mangli nahi thi. It was like a big event. Like they had, you know, everything, kind of like a mini wedding.
Yeah, that's the thing, you know, it
kind of made it so official to the point that if you go back from that, it won't happen, you know, because like so many people that I didn't even know attended that engagement,
which was mad. Like,
if people are coming, they're giving gifts, and in my head, I'm like, I don't even know them. And then, you know, at the weddings, they're like,
जब आप छोटी थी मैंने आपको
गोद में उठाया था. I'm like, I don't know you at all.
मैं भी छोटी हूँ. छोटी थी क्या मतलब? Yeah, right. Oh man. Okay. So the engagement happened.
Wild.
You said your dad did not talk to you. He just kind of went, चलो चलो सारा करते हैं. अच्छा.
Yeah.
Did you ever at any point in time after that start coming to terms with this and saying, okay, ye ho gaya, now I have to go through with this? Or did you fall into like a rebellious mode?
I first became rebellious, then I came to terms with it, and then I became rebellious again. So it was like kind of like transitioning into different phases over and over again, because when I traveled back, obviously it's not a secret that, you know, I'm engaged, and, you know, I told my friends, and the word kind of spreads around. And it was pretty tough because people don't understand that, like, to the kind of situation that I'm in. And I kind of lost focus in terms of my education. I became so reckless. And then at one point in time, like, I was like, you know what? Let me try to make this work. But at that point, I didn't know what love was, you know? So even if you try to mingle around and you try to, you know, speak and everything seems fine because you're cousins and, you know, you talk like that. But it still felt weird, you know? But then everything was going fine until I started realizing that, you know, this is not for me, because obviously the person, like, the more you grow, the more you start to realize and understand that person, you know, that you're talking to. And as a child, obviously, when you're growing, that's when you understand these things. So I was growing up at that point, and then I started realizing, oh, this is not right.
And how long were you engaged? Was it like a few months or a few years?
So I was engaged for 7 years.
Wow.
And
7.
2 years, like, I kind of like just kept fighting with my parents because obviously it takes time to break these type of things off, especially when family's involved. So yeah, pretty long time.
7 years, yeah. So yeah, you were basically 19. Up until you were 19, you were engaged.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you said for a period of time, you started kind of accepting this, like, you know, theek hai, you know, try to make it work. But like you said, you know, your understanding of what love is or what marriage could be at such a young age, right? You hadn't really developed that yet. Especially, you know, I'm sure you were trying to focus on your studies too. Like, maine kuch banna bhi hai, you know, sirf rotiyan nahi pakani.
At that point, when I did get engaged, I stopped focusing on my education in the sense that I could not focus at all. Agar itne piche, like, you know, in your head, you have this thing that, oh my God, you know, I'm engaged and now I don't know when my parents are going to get me married off. And especially when I remember I was like 15 and 16, it started really, really hitting me because people started talking about how, I might get married. And
I kept telling them that
specifically, actually, when I was 14, I remember one of my cousins approached me and she's like, you might get married by 16. And I said, how do you know that? And that, elders are having this conversation that the sooner the better, engagement should not be for that long. And that, if you guys do nikah, it should be fine. You can do the rukhsati later on, the walima and all that. But you should have them married. And I really fought with my parents about that as well because pressure was a lot. I could start feeling it because my aunt kept saying that, when are they going to get married? When we should start, looking into it. And I told them that over here in Dubai, 18, marriage below the age of 18 is not allowed.
So I tried to find my excuses, that it's not allowed. So just
Let it be and let me finish my education. So it kind of we just tried to move things forward just like that with type of excuses until it reached to a point where I felt like my education was being affected to the point that I felt like I could not become something that I wanted in the near future. So I thought that maybe I'll have to get married and then I can pursue my education or my career. And that is what it had reached to towards the complete end. They were like, go to Australia and wahan pe khudi yani ke he can pay for your education. This is not my parents' words, but this is my family, my cousins and all that they were saying. And I kept telling them that I don't want to get married and then finish my education because then responsibilities come after that as well. But I don't think people understand those type of things.
Wow.
So, yeah, I really I think after I came to
University, I really had a reality check that, hey, you have to work on your career to become something in life. Otherwise, things are not going to move forward and you're going to end up being a housewife. And I don't want that.
Yeah, you don't want to be completely dependent on a guy. Even if you have a good relationship, good consensual marriage and everything, in general, I think now we're living in a society where everybody wants to be kind of independent. Koi pata nahi hota, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to have a pessimistic outlook of it. Even if, kuch bhi ho sakta hai, right? The guy could become unable to work for whatever reason, right? They can have issues themselves. Wo bhi insani hai. And it's good for a woman to be able to support herself too.
Now, I understand that, if women choose to be housewives, in my case, they were supportive that, you can work and all that. But all I could hear was that they want you married. They just want you to get done with the shadi. Theek hai, shadi karo, ek saal Pakistan mein raho, they'll teach you their ways, and then you can go abroad, and then you can continue your education. And then mishaps happen. I have seen a lot in my family. They end up starting a family and then, women are not able to continue with their education because it becomes really hard. And I feel like people don't talk about these things because family planning is not a thing in Pakistan, right? So, I just felt like, my values and his values were different. As I grew, I realized that I want to be more independent. I want to work on myself and I want to do it, without him. And that is the route that I took.
Yeah. And then going back to what you mentioned earlier about the legal age to get married in Dubai is 18, right? I have to finish researching this. In Pakistan, I think the minimum age is 18 as well. Though I have to confirm because one of the articles I'm reading right now shows that there's a little debate going on where the Islamic, kind of scholars are saying, these types of restrictions are haram. They're anti-Islamic. Matlab 18 saal ki umar nahi honi chahiye. As soon as a girl becomes, gets into puberty, she's allowed, you're allowed to get married to her. So they're trying to fight against, and ironically, the person who's trying to pass this bill, at least on this article, is Seher Kamran, who is, from that PIS, the senator proud to be Pakistani videos. So it seems like she's trying to actually set the legal age to 18, and a lot of the scholars are fighting back.
Actually, about that, just recently, a friend of mine had sent me a picture. I'll try to look it up and send it to you later. It was basically a picture about the rule in Pakistan of it being the age of 18, if I'm not mistaken, that you cannot get married. And if I think a woman does get married or if a guy gets married without consent, they can get jailed and all of that. Some type of, I think, law is there, however.
Yeah, it's one thing to write a law down or write a policy, and then another thing to actually enforce it. तो पाकिस्तान में ऐसा भी होता है, कई laws होते हैं जो enforce ही नहीं होते, I think.
Yeah.
Also, now that I think about it, the
But then लोग
engagement,
पैसे दे के भी
actual engagement should also be considered as part of this criteria. Like 12 साल की उम्र पे engagement or against consent, any age, right? Against consent, nobody should be forced into an engagement, even though they're not married yet. इसको अभी consider नहीं किया गया.
I think that regardless of laws being there, the elders might still talk about it, right? Because I think there's something that cannot be stopped. Yes, kids can go up and, try to fight for themselves. But then there's another issue with that where, Pakistanis end up bribing and then they get away with it, So I feel like those things will take a lot of time to change, but it is a possibility. And I feel like there should be more help for children who are going through that. Like, if, for example, if they're going through it and they report it, what is the next steps? Because if their family pays off and tries to take the child back, they're basically being forced to marry without consent. So I think that nothing protects them over there. Luckily, like somehow, with my case, I ended up fighting it through, but I was in Dubai. So I could call the police and be like, hey, my parents are getting me married without my consent. So they would have, fallen into trouble. But in Pakistan, if that would have happened, I don't think I would have survived that.
And police, police they're not entirely dependable. Police ke paas aap jaye, you might not be taken seriously, especially if you're a kid in this situation of forced marriage or forced engagement, right? They'll be like, beta, apne maa baap se baat kar lo, वगैरह.
Yeah.
They're not going to take you seriously, unfortunately.
But they do that for couples as well, because I've heard that domestic abuse, when women go through that, or even if men, I think a lot of men don't really talk about it, but I'm sure that they go through it as well in Pakistan. And when they do go through it and they go to the police, they say, "Okay, aap log ke aapas ka mamla, you guys have to sort it out because you guys are married.
Yeah.
So this is just between you guys." So they don't really do anything about that as well. And also the scholar thing that you mentioned, it's a pretty crazy discussion, on my TikTok video as well right now, because right now I have 1.5 million views, and the only reason why is because people are still engaging on that post, and people are arguing. Every day that I open my TikTok, I see people arguing still that the scholars say that it is okay to get married, at a young age, as long as the lady, a girl becomes a woman, and that's how it happened in the Prophet's time. But then people are arguing as well that the world that we live in, these things are not okay because there are different laws in place. And they say that, whatever the Sharia law is being, whatever is happening in this country, for example, in Dubai, if it's not allowed, it is not allowed. That is the rule that you have to follow. So I feel like everyone has different opinions about religion, but then I feel like our culture ruins it the most.
Right. Yeah. It's a very fiery topic, I think. Yeah. This is a never-ending debate. Or there's just so much ambiguity, I think. And a lot of this is because of the scholars themselves. Scholars इतना लड़ते हैं आपस में, right? पहले कहते हैं कि scholars के पास जाओ, हमने सबसे ज़्यादा पढ़ा हुआ है, हम इस्लाम को जानते हैं, हमारे पास आओ, to answer these types of questions. But then you find scholars, like two different scholars who absolutely hate each other. They've studied the same amount, and yet, they come to completely different conclusions. One says, ये allowed है, दूसरा कहता है allowed नहीं है. And then they got death threats against each other, death fatwas and all that. It's like a mafia. पूरा बदमाशी का system है basically.
Yeah. It's just that I feel like, reading these stats,
as you mentioned, that, you don't really believe it until you see someone, close to you, or you yourself are going through it. You don't understand the height of the situation. It is so frustrating. I feel like in the position that I am now, I still see a lot of people that I personally know go through that. And even though their elders have seen what I've gone through, I'm considered as a rebellious child. So nobody's going to try to understand what I went through. So they still think that, if they do the same thing with their children who are, grown up and they can make, decisions, for themselves, they think they can still do that to them. And that is what sucks, because that's when, the abuse, the mental and physical abuse starts.
Again, if you continuously say no.
Yeah, it's a clash.
So,
it's a generational clash, basically. उनके values बिल्कुल अलग हैं, हमारे values थोड़े अलग हैं. And religion, especially, people get very emotional about things like culture and religion. कि यार हमने इन चीज़ों को preserve करना है. Even I agree with that. क्योंकि मैं काफ़ी मैं 30 सालों का हूँ, so I'm like in between the two generations. तो मैं काफ़ी understand करता हूँ, yeah, ठीक है, there's some values in our culture or religion that we should preserve. I think a lot of people agree to that. हम बस ये कहते हैं कि यार basic चीज़ें जो हैं, without getting into the weeds of whether it's allowed in Islam or whether it's not allowed in Islam, let's just understand कि आजकल के ज़माने में ये चीज़ें नहीं चलती. And then, you also have to think about ये image क्या set कर रहा है इस्लाम के बारे में, right? ठीक है, 12 साल की उम्र की शादियाँ होती होंगी उस ज़माने में. And if you think about it, even if the Prophet married Aisha at such a young age, my brother mentioned this, it was a very good argument कि आप उस ज़माने के लोग देखें जो हमारे हज़रत मोहम्मद सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को पसंद नहीं करते थे, right? They're his biggest critics. They criticized him about a ton of other things, but they never criticized his marriage or marriage choices, right? तो उस कल्चर में बिल्कुल अलग था. अब कॉन्टेक्स्ट अलग है, लोग अलग हैं, कल्चर अलग है, और मॉडर्न दुनिया में इन चीज़ों को एक्सेप्ट नहीं किया जाता. So we have to kind of conform with that. And when we do these types of things, especially such things के वो लड़की खुद agree नहीं कर रही, right? It's against her consent. It's like basic common sense to me. It's a common sense violation of human rights. और इन चीज़ों पे भी हम इस्लाम को डाल रहे हैं. We're tarnishing kind of the image of Islam by putting our own emotions on the line.
100%. I think that people try to, combine culture and religion as one. And that is, I think, where we go wrong. Because in our religion, yes, these things have happened, where, these type of marriages happened. However, there's this thing called consent as well, where it has been mentioned. I remember listening to Mufti Menk as well. And I like listening to him because
you like Mufti Menk?
Yeah.
I haven't listened to him much. My sister keeps telling me about him. She's like, Mufti Menk ye kehta hai, Mufti Menk says. I'm like, since when did you start listening to any Mufti? She's not that religious, but she likes Mufti Menk. So I gotta start watching him too and see what he's about.
Yeah, he talks about the religion, but he doesn't talk it in a way where you have to do it like this. He'll talk about women's rights. He'll talk about, men's rights, but he will not, it's like, enforce karna tahiye that you have to make sure that you follow it like this, otherwise, gunah milega, otherwise you're a sinner. There are scholars who do that, that you should follow it by the book, but then he doesn't do that. He just tries to educate people. So he also has like this video about, consent, that if you are going to get your child married, ask them. If your child says no, you should listen to them and get them married to someone who they say yes to. They're allowed to meet, however, bade hone chahiye. Elders should be there at all times, meet in like public settings. It's completely fine. Meet however, like much you want, but in boundaries. Okay? That, and if he or she says no, and you still try to force them to get married, that marriage is nullified. So that marriage does not exist. Okay, आप लोग की शादी हो जाए, you get married, you are, you have kids and everything. In Islam, your marriage is like nullified completely. So that is there in our religion, but then when you try to teach this to your elders, they don't listen.
But when it comes to,
for example, if I don't listen to my parents, they'll be like, I have the right to get you married to whoever I want to.
And I've heard this sentence so many times from a lot of people who go through this. That is where they go wrong. Yes, we are supposed to respect our elders, especially our parents. We have to do a lot for them. However, these type of decisions are not supposed to be made by them. They can only assist us, through this journey and process. So parents think that they have the right to say yes or no in that case as well, which is then they bring in the religion and everything. Or us ourselves, when we say, okay, you're saying that you're elder to us and that you have this right. However, our religion says no, that the marriage is nullified. Then they don't listen at all. They're like, बदतमीजी कर रहे हो.
फिर culture आ जाता है बीच में, right? इज्जत नहीं करते, वगैरह वगैरह. लेकिन you said Mufti Menk, right? Mufti Menk ने ये बोला. I think I agree with what he said, and it makes a lot of sense. The issue probably is that your parents probably don't listen to Mufti Menk. They probably have another scholar. हमारी family में ये बहुत होता है. Like I tell my mom, ये YouTube video देखें, इसमें ये Mufti साहब ने ये बोला. And my mom will be like, नहीं, that's not true, because my Mufti साहब, वो जो हमारे पाकिस्तान में रहते हैं, वो गली, अगर आप गली को क्रॉस करें ना, वो नीचे जाएं गली के, इधर वो मुफ्ती साहब रहते हैं, उन्होंने ये बोला है. I'm like, why is that Mufti साहब over there in Pakistan in some random gully talking about US issues? US में, interest लेना halal है कि haram है. I'm like, yeah, ठीक है. Halal hoga ya haram hoga, but you should listen to scholars over here who live over here, who understand the issues over here. Like I said, scholars are not on the same page because हमारे पास एक central, we don't have a central authority right now in Islam. Like Christians have the Pope, for example. Whatever the Pope says, Catholics, right? Whatever the Pope says, everybody can follow it. So they have that kind of advantage.
Yeah.
हमारे पास ये advantage नहीं है, क्योंकि in our case, every mufti can fight another mufti and say, well, what you said is haram or halal, it's not right. Anyway, so we can finish your story. I think we diverted a lot. You said you were engaged up till you were 19 for about 7 years, right? फिर क्या हुआ? Like you said, you fell into kind of a rebellious mode again. How were you able to get out of this?
So it kind of like started with the realization that this is not for me. And I think my parents did not understand what that meant, because for them is meri baat suno, and that this is right for you. And everyone kept telling me that, don't make a mistake that will, ruin your reputation in that case. And I just did not agree, because the more I spoke to the guy, the more I realized that I have different values. And, guys tend to, typical desi guys will end up saying ke लड़की बदतमीजी कर रही है, ठीक है, इसको घर के तरीके सिखाने हैं. She doesn't know how, Pakistani households are. When she will get married, then I will teach her these things. And these things were told, like I was told these things. So I was like, okay, that, if this is how it's going to be, I don't want this. I remember him saying stuff like, because it was all about my education, actually. So there was one point when I started university. So instead of doing A levels, I did foundation. So that's like an entry level to university. It's like 6 to 8 months. And I had just started that. And my father, he was really ill. So he was like, I have to quit my job and we might have to shift to Pakistan. And the first thing that this guy thinks is that, I think that your dad must be worried about, marriage and all that. And I look at him and he was here in Dubai at that time when my dad quit his job. And I look at him and I'm like, that's the only thing that you can think about? My dad just, is going to quit his job because of his health. He's not going to be thinking about marriage. He's going to think about, moving to Pakistan and his health and all that. Obviously I'm like, okay, I'm starting university. I don't want to move to Pakistan because I will not survive there. And then I just started talking to my parents, like, please just send me abroad. It's way cheaper and the same amount that you'll be paying in Pakistan, thode se aur paise dal ke, you can just send me abroad and I'll be good. I'll like work and I'll get experience. So at that point, my dad looked like, he was like getting convinced because I was doing so much research about it. And then this guy, I remember I had this phone call while I was in university, and I told him, he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh, I'm looking at universities abroad. He's like, what? And I said, yeah, I am. Like, I'm just checking up, keeping my options open. He got so mad at me and he's like, you're not going to go abroad. I'm not going to allow it. My father's not going to allow it. And I was like, excuse me, who are you to say that to me? And you're not paying for my education. My father is going to be paying for my education. So you have no right to say that. So apparently I was rude to him, and मैंने बदतमीजी की, and I just said what I had to say, and I felt like I said the right thing, because I was like, हमारी engagement हुई है, we are not even, in the guy fight. If I was your wife, yes, it was understandable for you to argue like that with me, but about my education, you can't say those things, because I'm not in your house yet. So he just kept arguing with me about that, and he would not let me focus on my education. And I remember those days were so stressful for me, and he made it even more stressful. And he just kept trying to bring that up. And at one point, he really pushed it by saying that, send me your grades of O levels. And he was, because after he was in Dubai, he traveled to Pakistan. And he tried to look for a university without asking me.
Oh.
So because he was like, okay, they're going to move, so I should look for a university first.
Right.
Yeah. And so that I don't if my dad sees that I got like admission, then I don't have to look for abroad. And that was like crossing the line for me. And he was like, now I'm gonna get the parents involved because badtameezi kar rahi ho, you're not listening to me. I was like, okay, involve the parents, and I had told my mom everything as well. But I needed a fight. I don't know what, but this
it was a right
and
time,
I took this
Yeah, I took the opportunity.
opportunity.
The iron
I
is
took
hot.
this opportunity, and I was like,
Strike while the iron's hot.
I was like, exactly.
And I was like, I'm going to take this chance to break the engagement off. But it kind of became very ugly for me because at that time, I remember like after a couple of months, like my dad decided to stay and all and, start a business over here. And this argument was still going on because he and I stopped talking to each other. And it reached to a point where my parents thought that I would change my mind, but they didn't understand that this is not what I wanted anymore. So it got really, really extreme. Like now I can say it, by laughing and all of that. That time I used to cry so much, like that, please listen to me, And when it broke as well, I was upset that, with the way that it ended because it was over call. Like, I think it was like Skype call where my mom was talking to them and, they started, just saying that, your daughter is really ill-mannered. She should listen to her parents. I don't know why she's disrespecting you like this. And, my mom said this one thing that I clearly remember. She was like, if my daughter is so bad, then why do you want, them to be engaged? Because at this point you're saying these things, and why didn't you say these things before? So, because like after I think like a day or two, they were trying to, try to patch things up. And then I think that my mom had that realization that no matter what she does or says, I will not listen to her about that. Because they were not listening to me. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to tell everybody that you guys are going to like force me to get married to someone that I don't want to. And I will call the police and I'll do that. So it was like me constantly threatening them.
Because I had nothing to do. I was threatening my own parents. I'm like, you threatened me, I threatened you now.
Do you think it worked?
I was so... It did.
It did. That's good.
I
think that in the beginning, I was threatened so much by them because they kept saying things like, "Tumhari university ban kar denge, ye ban kar denge," jab padhai ban kar denge, school se baith jaogi. And then at that point, when they were not listening to me, I was ready to end up on the streets. I was like, I will pack my bags and I will go. I will live on the streets, but I will not stay with my parents because they will end up getting me married to someone that I don't want to marry. And it was so extreme. Like I had given up on everything and I had nothing to lose at that point. And I think that is what scared them, that they knew and understood that I had nothing to lose, is when they ended up agreeing because they knew that I was serious, that I would leave the house. Because I remember there was a time where I was so close to doing that. I remember packing my bag and my brother kind of realized, and he was pretty young at the time, and he was like, please, Api, don't do this. He started crying. He started bawling his eyes out. I'm like, please stop making me emotional,
Wow.
And I think the main reason to why I ever stayed was because of my siblings. Even though they were pretty young, they kind of still supported me, even though they didn't understand the situation.
Yeah, अच्छा हमारे culture में, going back to the whole बदतमीजी thing, हमारी आपकी लड़की बहुत, कहना नहीं मानती, ये बदतमीज है. I don't know why in our culture it's like you pick the girl first, and then you want to change her. So you don't pick her because of what you like about her, right? Like for example, simple example, लड़की को खाना पकाना नहीं आता, लेकिन आपने फिर भी पसंद कर लिया. लेकिन at the same time you like biryani, आपको कढ़ाई पसंद है, आपको पाए पसंद है, हलीम पसंद है. और लड़की को तेरे को पकाना नहीं आता. Okay, now you feel it's like her obligation to learn all of those things rather than finding a girl who can cook all those things in the first place and is gifted with cooking, right? ये नहीं कि जिंदगी में कुछ सीखना कोई बुरी बात है. Everybody continues to learn, but they have to express those types of interests. They have to have those types of interests. हर लड़की को खाना पकाने का शौक नहीं होता, for example. और कई लड़कों को शौक होता है लेकिन उनको discourage कि I love cooking, for example. So I even taught my wife a little bit of cooking. So I can say कि यार मैंने उसको सिखाना है, right? But a lot of guys will be like, मैं, जब हमारी शादी होगी मैं तुमको सिखाऊंगा. And it's like, dude, आप तो अपनी laundry अभी तक नहीं करते. आपकी अम्मी आपकी laundry करती हैं. आपकी अम्मी आपके खाना पकाती हैं. So what are you going to teach me possibly about taking care of a home when you haven't taken care of a home yourself? I find that really ironic about guys in our culture, like the old, जो cultural type of guys हैं. काफी लोग तो बदल गए, काफी guys ऐसे नहीं सोचते अब.
Actually, that also, you're 100% right. And one more thing, that when guys go abroad, like, अकेले रहना पड़ता है as a bachelor and everything, and को खुद चीजें करनी पड़ती हैं. तो I have heard people say कि, मुझे शादी करनी है. And the reason why they want to do that is because they don't want to do those things anymore.
They don't want to do those things.
It's bad.
Maid chahiye unko. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. So you said basically you guys had this kind of altercation on Skype, थोड़ी back and forth हुई, और वहाँ पे was there decisions made shortly after that to break off the engagement?
Yeah.
So that was when you were 19 and now you're 21. So that's only been like what, 2 years or less?
Yeah, 2.5, 2 years. Yeah, about that. Yeah. So the thing is, like with these things, like
even before that, like I know that for 7 years I was engaged, and then I think like towards, like you could say those 7 years, like towards the end only the fights like really started becoming intense. So when like it officially broke, it was like proper like 7 years. But the arguments and everything started beforehand itself, because these type of things, they don't happen overnight. I was fighting for about 1.5 years. I kept telling them that actually my parents knew that I wanted to break the engagement off, and they would not say anything, and they'd be like, हाँ हम बात करेंगे. And I remember my uncle and aunt went with us for Umrah, and the entire trip I was so anxious because I was like, abhi baat karenge, they will just talk to them. And I had this like, I had just convinced myself that somehow they will speak to them, but they didn't. And that really broke my heart. And, that is when slowly I started threatening them. I was like, okay, so now if you're not listening to me at all and you promised me, now I'm going to start playing my cards. And then once it became to the point where, it became too much, that is when that fight picked up as well. So I just needed a reason to try to break the engagement off, and I just took that and I went at it. So it's like, I feel like people don't understand the kind of hardships people go through, and how it really affects your relationships with people. But in my opinion, like all of those things really taught me that, blood is in everything, and that I have found better, more royal relationships with people outside of my family. And I feel like they've supported me more with this decision than anyone else. So now that I go and see those people that were, against me breaking my engagement off, I don't see them the same way.
Now that you're also an adult, right? Now you can fully understand and analyze the situation over the last, 10 years of your life, at least. I know that for your parents, it was probably a very difficult conversation. That's why they probably stalled on this a bit, right? You were like, ho sakta hai, abhi baat karenge, but they didn't do it. It was probably because they were very uncomfortable. But that's not nearly as painful as what probably you went through, right? For about 7 years of the engagement. So to go through this, I'm sure you're on a path of recovery. Like it's not just something that you're over right away, right? Although you have those funny TikToks and everything.
Course.
I mean, I know you made them humorous, but there's a lot of sadness in there too that I could sense. Obviously it was a real story. It's not like something made up. So that's why I reached out to you.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that especially like when it comes to TikTok and everything, you can't make it too sad either. So obviously that entertainment like aspect had to be put in, but then it's pretty painful still, because at the end of the day, coming to terms with it is really tough when you meet family that they make you feel like, you made the wrong decision or something, I went to Pakistan during December, and I went after 4 years. So my engagement had already broken during that period of time. So they had not seen me during that period of time at all.
Yeah.
So I went and, they're giving me like weird looks like, hey, I am still the same person. Yes, I've grown a lot, but I knew, I kind of expected it, but still when you start going through that, right, it's really painful because you're going there to enjoy your time, and then people are just like staring at you and then asking you questions like, oh, so are you still talking to them? Or, all those kinds of stuff. And I feel like people around me make it more difficult for me. Yeah. Like my own family makes it more difficult for me to move forward. Yeah. So.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like.
The most uncomfortable thing I think around this would be extended family. Whenever you already know when you're not there, or when you're in the other room, then they're talking about your pus ho rahi hai kanon mein. So that then they wonder कि यार लड़की family के साथ time क्यों नहीं गुजारती, family के करीब क्यों नहीं है, right? फैमिली से दूर क्यों चली गई है, उसने अपनी कंपनी बिल्कुल बदल ली है, घरेलू लड़की नहीं है। और घरेलू इसलिए नहीं है क्योंकि आपने उसको उसके साथ ट्रस्ट इस्टेब्लिश ही नहीं की। वो 12 साल की थी तो फरजाना
Exactly.
आपने तो उसके पेरेंट्स को सपोर्ट किया, यू डिडंट सपोर्ट द हेल्पलेस इनोसेंट गर्ल, एंड नाउ
Yeah.
you want her to be your best friend or something. I don't.
Oh my God. I remember when I was going through this, right? This is what actually really hurt me the most. And that is something that was brought up when I went. So, one of my aunts, she was like, because she's my dad's sister. So she came to me and she's like, oh, are you talking to his mom? Because she had traveled and she came to the house. So, she's busy. So I'm trying to be as normal as possible. And everyone's asking me, like, are you talking to her? And I'm like, yes. And then the conversation always ended up being about the engagement. And I think that I completely put a pause to that, conversation by saying that you never cared enough to ask me if I was okay. So you have no right to ask me how I am now, in the sense that how I'm interacting with these people, because you really don't care. You just want to know, the gossip. You want to know the tea. And I really said that to them directly, because I feel like if you don't do that, and I at this point don't care if I'm rude, because they really don't respect my boundaries. They never did, and they just want to know what is up and everything. And it was a very difficult conversation as well, but you have to say it. People don't understand that at all, because shortly after my engagement broke, my uncle passed away as well. And he got engaged to someone else at that time. And we were like coming to terms with it as well. And but when my parents flew to, my uncle's, funeral, it's like there's this post that I saw as well, that in Pakistan, people are more concerned about the food that they have to serve the guests than actually mourning,
The loss that has happened within the family.
Oh, yeah.
So
when my parents flew out, I was here because I had university. So when they did, my mom was really upset because not only was, the loss of our uncle was like obviously really hard, but then other people were making it hard for us that, because they were coming and they were like, oh, so why did the engagement break? And these people have no, right to ask us those things, but they feel the need to as well.
So yeah, I mean, in that case, like it's really, really hard to move forward in that case, because it's always like a reminder that I went through this. Yeah. But in a negative way.
Yeah, they're not helping you get over it, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah, flashbacks aayi ja rahi hain.
Yeah. And like the thing is, like, I really don't mind having a conversation about it, but I really want people to understand how I feel as well, that this is a very sensitive topic to me. Like, for example, if I talk to my friends about it, I'm very open with it. I talk to strangers about it because, obviously since the TikTok thing happened, I've had
like numerous conversations with a lot of people, and I'm okay with having those conversations.
But then now it's like,
like I'm comfortable with these conversations, but with my family, I'm just not. And recently my parents just moved to Pakistan. So I feel like I will have to see them, when I move, when I like when I, visit them in Pakistan and everything. Astaghfirullah, I don't want to shift over there.
Shift to Pakistan. Yeah, is your relationship still kind of shaky with your parents, you would say, or has it improved?
It has improved a lot. I feel like they really, really teach me a lot. And that is the reason why I'm actually here as well, because I mean, they completely shifted, by the way. So
yeah, right.
Since it broke, we have a better relationship and everything. I feel like there are a lot of things that still could change because they're very sensitive to their elders and all of that. But this topic too, because I feel like my mom is way more sensitive. My dad's more understanding of it now, especially after he lost his brother. He kind of understood that this was wrong, and that
no child should go through this,
and that he is more supportive of, if anyone is going through that, he tries to support them that, hey, this is wrong. But on the other hand, my mom is a little
but a lot of it is just about kuch cheezein aap achieve kar sakte hain, kuch nahi kar sakte, I think. And maybe that's good enough, right? They completely grew up in a different time, so their standards are very different from yours. तो वो आप बिल्कुल उनको अपनी साइड पे नहीं लेके आ सकते, सारे नहीं लेके आ सकेंगे, कुछ लोग ले आते हैं, but not all parents are fully understanding of their kids in that aspect. So you have to kind of compromise, I guess. In your case, it seems like it worked out, and you have a better relationship with them now. So maybe that's good enough.
It's just that like where they have moved, it is, near my family, and that's what like where I was going to come to, where that they, since they have shifted, it makes it more difficult for me to go back there, because now they're near the family. I mean, obviously they're going to be like living in their own house and all that, but
Yeah.
it makes it more difficult for me because the guy is married now. He has moved forward in life, but then the people are still like that. They're ruthless. No matter who gets married off and everything, they still like to bring up the things of the past, and that really puts you in a very like bad position, because you just don't want to have that conversation anymore with people. Like I went when I went to Pakistan last time, my aunt was like, "Acha, chalo ab ye to ho gaya hai." After this conversation, when I told her that you guys didn't care and all that, so she changed topic.
Right.
Okay, khatam ho gaya, but now what do you want to do after you start working? You'll work for a year or two. Then what do you think about marriage? And I was like,
You have known that.
After such a traumatic experience, you want me to think about marriage?
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. फिल्टर तो है ही नहीं ना, हमारे एल्डर्स की बातों में फिल्टर होता ही नहीं. वो सोचते बाद में है और बात पहले करते हैं.
Yeah, exactly.
Because even one of my aunts, like from my mom's side, when she visited over here, it was such a funny, like, and weird and awkward conversation. Like, the mood kind of shifted, because even she said the same thing, that, abhi pad rahi ho, so you're going to work on your career. Okay, then what? And I was like, I don't know. Like, I'm going to see what I have to do in life. And she's like, then what about marriage? And I said that after what has happened to me, I don't think that I'm going to get married anytime soon. And she became so offended to that. And she's like, how can you say that? Shadi karni to hai tumne. And it was like as if I'm her child, And
Right.
she had no right to question me like that. And she was like, abhi tum late marriage karogi to tumhare, you won't be able to have kids and all. There will be so many problems. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, it's like, she wants me to plan out my whole life.
Like, I just have to get married so that
I should be able to have children by that time. Yeah.
Do you ever talk back to them, to the aunties, or do you just kind of stay quiet?
Oh, yeah.
The thing is, like,
now people try to avoid picking fights with me because they know that I will answer back. So they
try to avoid these conversations with me because I will just fire, and I will tell them off.
Even if it upsets me that they're talking to me like this, I will still not be quiet, because the more you let them disrespect you, they're just going to keep doing that as well.
Stepping over you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you have to kind of fight back. I mean, as politely as possible. लेकिन कभी-कभी थोड़ा सा, I can understand, बदतमीजी हो जाती है, खास तौर पे इतने emotional topic में, on something that you went through, right, personally. It's not easy to be completely polite over it when they're stepping all over you. So I can understand that.
Like, for example, if I have this conversation, if it's about anything, I'll always speak to them politely, but I know where to draw the line as well. So
either, like,
I'm not that rude, I become sarcastic. So I will start bringing in their children as well. So if someone asks me about, like, when I want to get married, I'll ask them about their kids. I'm like, when are you planning to get your child married? And that's when the conversation completely changes, because they're like, oh, usne to abhi padhna hai.
You put them on the defense.
Yeah.
So then we don't know how to
answer to that, and the topic completely changes. Like, tum batao, acha tumne kya, at that time it was like, shadi ki tayari ho gayi hai ki nahi.
I know. Just drew the line over there.
Yeah. Only thing that I think that, like, it's important to kind of like mention to whoever is listening to this is that, a lot of us go through this, but we don't have a conversation about it. And it's like really difficult to have this conversation with anyone. And I think that if anyone is going through it, they should come forward and have these conversations with people that they trust, because it's not okay to stay stuck in this loop with your parents where they're not listening to you and all of that. And I think that it's okay to ask for help, because I feel like, constantly we feel like, we have to fight our own battles. And it's very important to know that there are so many people here to support you. Because when I posted this video, it was with the intention of making people aware that these things happen, even if they think that they don't anymore. And when the kind of response that I got, I realized that a lot of people started coming out with their stories on the comments, and they were messaging me as well. even if you choose not to tell your friends, there is this huge platform called TikTok. Share your story and
Tell people how you're feeling. And if
you know, some people need money to run away. I'm not even kidding. People put their like Venmo or whatever. You get so much support on these platforms, but just put yourself out there and share your story. And if you're still hesitant, talk to the people around you, because it is just not okay to be in this situation. And we get this one life. Like, I don't think that you're supposed to continuously live the way that your parents want you to. I know that there is like a limit to that as well. Like, obviously when you're dependent on them, you have to listen to them for a lot of things. Like, I'm still dependent on my parents until I, you know, find my way, you know, in my career. But there is a limit to that as well, especially when it comes to conversations like this. And it's really important to stand up for yourself and the people around you.
So
yeah,
fight for your rights and find support, right?
100%.
Awesome. Thank you once again for tuning in to this episode of Popcorn. Remember to follow Noor on TikTok and Instagram if you like this episode, and tune into the YouTube video version of this episode as well if you haven't already. Share this with your family and friends, and feel free to share your thoughts on our Instagram page. We'll see you next time.